I thought the desert had nothing left to give until I heard the faintest gasp beneath a broken mesquite, and found a baby swaddled in dust, her fingers curled around the badge I no longer had the right to wear. 6 days into the desert I walked without a destination, the horizon wavering like a promise forever withheld. After sundown my shadow stretched longer than a man deserves. By dawn it shrank to nothing, leaving me alone with the hush of the Santa, Rosa Flats and the echo of a single gunshot that still rang behind my ribs. I had taken a life by mistake, one stray bullet in a street I was sworn to keep safe, and the badge that once rode my chest now dangled from a thread in my pocket. Cold and accusing mid-morning, the wind rose and died again, lifting a veil of dust that drifted across the hardpan like smoke from an invisible pyre. It was in that lull when everything grew so quiet even the quail held their breath that I heard a sound small enough to be imagined, a sigh, part whimper, part intake of air, as though the earth itself were testing its lungs. Instinct drew me left toward a fallen mesquite split by lightning seasons ago. The branches clawed at emptiness, bark bleached gray, thorns brittle. Beneath its canted trunk lay a bundle the color of dawn ash, wrapped in calico too fine for these wastes. I dropped to my knees. The bundle moved. A fist no larger than a sparrow's heart poked free, pale and trembling. Dark lashes fluttered. On a face more still than any child's ought to be, yet her lips worked against silence, searching for breath. My pulse tripped. Wagon wheel marks led up, then vanished where the latest storm had scoured the ground clean. Whoever left her meant to erase the trail. My hands, stained by gunpowder and regret, hesitated before lifting her. Her weight was almost nothing, a warm parchment pressed to my palm, fragile as the promise of rain. I listened for a cry. None came. Only the rise of her chest, shallow and stubborn. I had no milk, no water fit for a babe. Still, I slipped my duster from my shoulders, tore the inner lining, and fashioned a sling against my chest. Dust rose as I stood, the child snug against the place my badge once rested. She stirred, a soft hiccup, and settled. The wind gave an answer far off to the south, a rolling mutter of thunder. As though some distant god cleared his throat, I walked until dusk bled out across the sky. When the first star appeared, I made camp beside a dry wash, my fire small, more ember than flame. I unwrapped the child enough to check her skin. Pulse flickered at her throat, faint but steady. The calico smelled of sage and faint perfume, evidence of a mother who had loved her, or at least prepared her for abandonment with gentle hands, guilt cinched tighter. Had I not failed before? What oath could hold steady now? Yet as the firelight reached her face, I felt a word form in my mind not spoken, more like a note struck on a tuning fork that hummed in the chest. Storm. I cradled her near the coals to steal what warmth I could. Above us the heavens banked dark cloud on darker, lightning tracing silent veins. Between rumblings I heard again that coal-puff gasp, the fragile protest that had saved her life, and perhaps what remained of mine. I spoke low so only she and the night might hear. Storm-born child, I said, the words rough as boots on gravel, I'll bear you to gentler skies. The promise felt heavier than iron but cleaner than confession. Her tiny hand flailed until it found the dangling badge on my shirt front, the star still clinging by its last thread. Fingers closed around its edge and she held fast, as though the metal were forged for her alone. Tempest, I whispered, baptizing her with the name thunder had lent. The clouds answered with a distant roll that rattled my tin cup, and in the sudden hush that followed, I understood. Storm and stillness, guilt and grace, were bound now by this fragile breath. Sleep came fitful. I dreamt of the town I'd left behind, faces turned away, a funeral bell tolling once, twice. Yet each time the nightmare pressed its weight, the child's sigh rose through the dark, steadying me like a hand on the shoulder when sunrise smeared. Pink across the flats, I studied the land eastward. Somewhere beyond those ridges lay an abandoned mission I remembered from patrol days. Its well might still hold water, its adobe walls a mercy against wind. I cinched my belt, shifted Tempest higher against my heart, and stepped into the dawn. The old badge hung between us. With every stride it touched her swaddling, a faint click of metal against cloth, as if counting the beats of a clock newly wound. And though the desert stretched empty for miles, I was not alone. The dust carried our footfalls forward, the silence listened, and the fire in my chest, for the first time in a season, felt like something worth tending. The sun was a bleached coin overhead by the time we reached the hills. The mission stood just beyond, its bones worn smooth by time and wind. Cracked adobe walls slouched into the earth, and a weather-beaten bell hung crooked in the tower like a saint tired of praying. Vines long dead curled across the stone archway. I stepped through with Tempest tight to my chest, her breath warm against my collarbone. Inside, the chapel was open to the sky, roof long since surrendered to storms. Fragments of stained glass still clung to the arched windows, and when the afternoon light passed through them, it spilled ribbons of red and blue and gold across the dirt floor. The colors danced on Tempest's cheeks as I laid her down beside my bedroll, the weight of beauty and ruin settling over us like an old quilt. I searched the grounds for anything of use. Behind the altar, I found a long dry well and a half-collapsed storeroom with a tin bucket, a rusted kettle, and 2 cracked bowls. A goat with ribs like drawn curtains wandered the yard, staring me down like it knew what I'd done. It kicked when I first tried, but eventually I coaxed it close and drew just enough milk to wet a rag. Tempest latched on clumsily, her hunger patient but real. I held her and hummed not songs exactly, just the low notes of memory, a rhythm meant to fill silence without demanding attention. The days passed like wind-carving stone, slow, invisible, but certain. I spoke little, only when I had to, and even then mostly to her. She didn't need answers, only warmth. I gave what I could. She watched me with eyes that didn't blink much, like she'd already seen what people were capable of and hadn't yet decided whether I deserved her trust. It was the 3rd evening when I saw the figure approach. A woman, shawl pulled tight, a water jug clutched in both hands. She stopped when she saw the fire. Her boots paused on gravel like she was weighing something ancient and invisible. I didn't reach for the rifle. She'd already seen the baby. She stepped closer. Mid-30s. Maybe hair bound back in a braid laced with dust. Her face bore the shape of recent grief, the kind that hollows a person without breaking them entirely. We stared across the fire for a long moment. Then she spoke. "This place dead?" She asked. "Mostly," I said. "You alone?" I looked down at Tempest, wrapped in the duster beside the flame. "No." She didn't answer right away. The wind moved through the chapel, stirring the hanging vines and the smell of dry sage. Finally, she crouched near the fire and set down her jug. "I'm Ruth," she said. "Valdez, my ranch dried up last spring. Been walking 3 days for water." I offered her the tin cup. She sniffed it, sipped, and grimaced. "Goat? Best I can offer." She drank anyway. That night we ground mesquite pods between stones, making a coarse paste that baked hard and tasted like bitterness soaked in ash. Still, it filled the belly. She didn't ask questions about the baby, not yet, but her eyes kept drifting to the child as we worked, watching, measuring. When Tempest cried, I moved to soothe her, hands stiff, unsure. Ruth watched me fumble the cloth wrap, watched how the girl quieted when I touched her brow. A strange hush fell over us. The only sound was the fire popping, the goat nosing through gravel nearby, and the breath of a sleeping child. We sat on opposite sides of the flame, our shadows stretching tall against the ruined walls. They looked like pilgrims cast in gold and smoke, bowed by something bigger than ourselves. Ruth didn't speak for a long time, then said softly, almost like she regretted it already, "You're not her kin. No, you don't run like a man who's taken something, but you carry her like she's yours." "She is," I sighed without thinking. The words felt right in my mouth, heavier than truth but truer than law. Ruth looked into the fire a while longer. "There's quiet in you," she said. "Like something hollowed you out?" I didn't respond. "Some things ought to remain unspoken." But I saw her expression shift, not pity, not judgment, recognition. She knew something of being hollowed, too. Later she rose, brushed ash from her skirt, and looked down at Tempest one last time. "You name her?" I nodded. Tempest. She smiled then, just a little. A storm child, she be strong. She left the next morning before first. Light, her jug refilled, a satchel of hard bread in her hand. She didn't say goodbye. Just nodded once as she passed the threshold, but I knew she'd return, not for water, for the girl. And maybe, if I didn't break the fragile silence between, yes, for me too. It was the stillness before a storm, not the wind itself, but the way the world seemed to lean back, waiting. That morning, the clouds hung lower than they had in weeks, flat and heavy, like slate poised to crack. I was splitting dry juniper. For firewood, when I saw the dust line moving across the flats, too steady for a traveler, too slow for riders in flight. I didn't need my spyglass to know who led them. Horace Leary, deputy out of Dry Fork, loyal to the badge the way a dog is loyal to a bitter man. Last I'd seen him, he was pulling a sheet over a boy I'd shot by accident, no more than 15. I'd offered my resignation on the spot. He'd taken it like a favor done too late. They rode in 5 deep, rifles unstrapped, eyes set ahead, like men already certain of what they'd come to take. Tempest was asleep in the sling against my chest. Ruth stood just inside the ruined chapel, one hand on the edge of the doorway, the other hidden behind her shawl. Leary dismounted first. He hadn't aged much, same narrow mouth, same scar near the temple where he'd once caught a bottle in. A saloon brawl, but something colder lived in his eyes now. She's county property, he said, skipping the greeting. Survivor of a wagon raid north of Burnt Hollow. 2 dead, their kins traced east. Girl matches the age. You got a claim, you'd best say it fast. I didn't answer. Just rocked slightly, letting Tempest stay tucked against me. Leary scanned the chapel behind me. Heard you were dead, Mercer. Or drunk, or both. Neither, I said. He motioned toward my chest. Still playing sheriff? I looked down. The old badge hung from the sling-tarnished pewter, barely legible. I'd forgotten it was there. I ain't sworn, I said. Just carrying what's mine, Leary's jaw tensed. She's not yours. Ruth stepped forward then, silent as a breath. She said nothing at first, only touched the tip of her fingers to Tempest's brow, then closed her eyes and whispered something I couldn't catch. The men shifted. One crossed himself, another looked away. Leary spat into the dust. Don't bring prayers into this. Law's the law. I saw then how it would play out. They'd take her, load her into some buckboard, send her off to strangers with paperwork and proper names. And if I tried to stop them, it'd end with bodies in the dirt. Mine, maybe Ruth's. Maybe one of theirs. And Tempest no longer a child, just a story told in regret? Still, my hand drifted toward the revolver at my side. My thumb brushed the worn grip. I felt Ruth's gaze but didn't meet it. The clouds rolled in closer. A deep rumble passed overhead, low and long, like a drumbeat meant for remembering. Then, sudden and soft, a single raindrop struck Tempest's cheek. She blinked, wriggled, and curled tighter into the sling. I let the moment hold. Then I unlatched the holster, pulled the revolver out slowly, not raised, just held it barrel down at my side, walked forward 2 steps. I won't draw, I said, not unless you make me. But I'll trade you something. Leary narrowed his eyes. You take me, I said. Charge me with obstruction, impersonating a lawman, whatever you've got to write down to keep your conscience clean. But the girl stays, the posse murmured. Leary's hand hovered near his belt. She's got a place here, I said. Roof over her head, hands that care for her. You send her east, she gets lost in numbers. Another orphan with no name. She already has a name, Ruth said, voice clear and quiet behind me. Tempested, you can hear it in the wind. Leary stared at me long and hard. The rain came again light, then a little steadier. Drops pattered on dry earth, hissing, like hot iron cooled in water. I should lock you both, he said. You could, I replied. But then you'll be the man who took a child from firelight into the cold. The silence stretched, drawn thin by tension and thunder. Finally, Leary holstered his pistol. You've got 2 days, he said. Then I come back with papers. County judge'll want proof, witness, anything. He turned to mount his horse. If you run, Mercer, I'll find you. I won't, I said. They rode off into the storm, shapes fading into mist as the first true rain in weeks poured from the sky. Ruth moved to my side and reached for Tempest, her fingers wiping the rain from the baby's face like a benediction. We stood there as the land drank deep. Number. Shouts, no violence. Just 3 souls, soaked and still standing, waiting to see if mercy would hold longer than thunder. The boards of the jail floor creaked like rigging in a gale, though no wind reached inside. Rain hammered the shingles, rattled the bars, pooled beneath the door until straw floated in thin eddies across the plank seams. A single lantern hissed, its wick drowning in its own oil. I could smell the river that had once slept under this town, roused now and prowling through the alleys. Tempest's sling was gone left with Ruth, and without that small warmth against my chest the cell felt vast enough to swallow a man whole. Leary had locked me in without words. The silence left room for the old guilt to walk its circuit, pacing like a restless guard. Every boom of thunder recalled the gunshot that had ended a boy and a badge in the same breath. Yet, when lightning flashed, I found myself counting heartbeats instead of regrets. The memory of a single raindrop on Tempest's cheek anchoring me against the undertow. Somewhere in the dark it dawned on me that storms end, even when a man persuades himself they are eternal. Near midnight the door scraped open. Leary stepped inside, coat dripping, hat pulled low. He leaned against the bars, arms folded. For a while he only listened to the downpour. Then he spoke, voice softer than I remembered. "Got a rider come in from Burnt Hollow. Says the couple with that child weren't ambushed. Quarreled over supplies. Rage took the kindling, whiskey took the flame. Nobody survived the fire but the baby. He let the truth hang between us like steam off a cooling brand. Bandits didn't slaughter them, their tempers did." He drew in a breath. "Still got to answer to the judge tomorrow. But it changes things." I studied his face in the dim. Hard lines, yes, but some edge had dulled, as if the rain were. "Sanding him down, and the boy I killed in Dry Fork?" I asked. "I read the coroner's note again," he said. "Ricochet off a tavern stove pipe. Poor ironwork, not your aim. You resigned before the ink dried." "Nobody asked you to carry the weight this long." He paused, wiping water from his brow. "Maybe I wanted you to." The night ran out of questions. When dawn edged pink beyond the window slats, the storm had spent itself. Streets lay flooded, mirroring a sky rinsed clean. I heard voices many moving toward the courthouse green. Boots sloshed, chickens squawked on roof beams, and somewhere a fiddle tried to lift a tune too early for dancing. Leary returned with a ring of keys and a sodden stack of papers. Town woke up talkative, he muttered while unlocking the door. Seems word spread about the child and the man who'd stand jail for her sake. Folks you never met signed this. He handed me the petition. Names covered the page in careful, rain-blurred ink storekeepers, field hands, schoolchildren tracing letters twice their height. At the bottom, in a steady, looping script, was Ruth Valdez. She waited outside beneath the overhang Tempest. Bundled in my duster, the leather dark with rain, but the child dry within. Ruth's eyes were rimmed red from fatigue, not tears, and when she passed Tempest into my arms, the baby woke and fixed on me with a calm too large for her size. The crowd gathered close. I recognized few but felt known all the same. A carpenter spoke about good soil needing steady hands. The blacksmith's wife offered milk. Even old Pastor Green lifted a weather-spotted Bible and said he'd seen orphans. Tucked behind every sacred verse, and who were they if not a congregation? Leary cleared his throat. "Judge ain't due till next week, bridge out south. Until then, these signatures hold enough weight for provisional guardianship." His gaze moved to the child, then back to me. "Don't make me regret it." I stepped into the flooded street, water lapping my boot tops, and felt the earth give a slow exhale. Guilt did not vanish. It merely loosened, like a cinch strap eased after a hard ride. Tempest pawed at the tarnished star pinned to the blanket. I unclasped it, pressed the cool metal into her grasp, and felt her fingers close stronger than before. By midday we reached the Mission Hill. The walls shone ochre against a sky the color of a polished kettle. Ruth carried a cottonwood sapling. She'd cut from the riverbank where the floodwater left new silt. We chose a spot near the chapel's fallen bell, the earth still soft from rain. I knelt, shovel-biting damp soil, each toss landing with the smell of new promise. Tempest watched, wide-eyed, the pewter star glinting in her fist. When the hole was ready, Ruth set the sapling upright. I tamped the soil while she whispered something in Spanish words about roots finding water, branches finding sky. Together we pressed our palms to the mud, sealing the cradle. A breeze came through the colonnade, lifting the sapling's leaves, so they shimmered like small coins, already richer than any badge I'd ever worn. From my pocket I drew a blank disc of pewter I'd hammered flat beside last night's lantern-no engraving. No authority claimed. I bound it to a rawhide thong and slipped it over Tempest's tiny wrist. She lifted the disc to the sun as if weighing its worth, then let it fall against her chest, content with its silence. Ruth stood at my side, hands stained with earth. Below us the valley steamed under newborn heat, riverbanks shining like ribbons unrolled after a long keeping. I felt the ground settle around the roots, the hush of the chapel embracing our breaths, and I understood that storms do not bury, they uncover? They strip away what cannot hold, leave space for what must. Tempest cooed, fist closing on the blank badge, and the sound was light enough that a man might mistake it for birdsong. I looked to the horizon where the clouds were already receding, and for the first time since laying down my gun, I felt the shape of tomorrow not a sentence to serve, but a field to tend, watered by the very storm that might have drowned us.